In a small, quiet town, Emma and Jason had always been the picture of a perfect couple. They met in college, fell in love quickly, and built a life together. Their bond seemed unbreakable, and to outsiders, they were the epitome of happiness. However, over the years, their relationship began to change in ways they couldn't quite understand. Jason was always busy with work, often traveling for business, while Emma stayed home, taking care of the house and trying to keep the connection alive. At first, she understood the demands of his job, but as months passed, the time apart began to take a toll on her. It started with small things, missed phone calls, delayed texts, and an increasing distance between them. Emma tried to brush it off, convincing herself that it was just a phase. But then she noticed something that she couldn't ignore. Jason had begun to act strangely when he was home. His once warm gestures seemed rehearsed, and his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. One evening, after Jason returned from a long business trip, Emma found a receipt tucked into the pocket of his jacket. It was from a high-end restaurant she had never heard of, and the time stamped on it was during a period when Jason had claimed to be working late in his hotel room. Her heart sank. It wasn't just the receipt, it was the weight of doubt that it carried. Emma's suspicions grew, and she began to pay closer attention to his behavior. Late nights on the phone, more business trips than usual, and subtle changes in the way he looked at her. Emma's once unwavering trust began to crack, but still, she hesitated to confront him. She wanted to believe that maybe she was just overthinking things. But one fateful evening, Emma returned home early from a visit to her mother's house. As she walked up the driveway, she saw Jason's car parked in the driveway. Only it wasn't empty. Through the window, she could see him sitting on the couch, his arm around a woman she didn't recognize. Emma stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She had so many questions, but they all felt like an insurmountable wall. Instead of storming in, she turned and quietly walked back to her car. She needed to think. For the next few days, Emma kept a low profile, avoiding Jason's attempts to talk to her. The hurt in her chest was unbearable, but she couldn't bring herself to confront him until she was sure of the truth. Finally, she decided to follow him one evening. She trailed him through town, keeping a safe distance as he pulled into a small, unassuming apartment complex. Her heart pounded as she watched him meet the same woman from the couch. They embraced, and Emma felt a wave of betrayal wash over her. She had known in her gut that something was wrong, but seeing it unfold before her eyes shattered any remnants of doubt. The confrontation, when it came, was raw. Jason was surprised, even shocked, but he couldn't deny it. His affair had been going on for months, a quiet secret hidden beneath layers of excuses and distractions. Emma listened in silence, her world crumbling with each confession. In the days that followed, Emma moved out of their shared home. She didn't have the strength to continue fighting for a love that had faded long before she'd realized it. Jason's apologies felt hollow, and the more he begged for her forgiveness, the more she realized that they had both been living in a lie. Emma spent the next several months finding herself again. She immersed herself in her passions, reconnected with old friends, and began to heal from the wound of betrayal. It was a painful journey, but it was one she needed to take alone. As for Jason, he tried to fix the broken pieces of his life, but he couldn't undo the hurt he had caused. The affair had shattered something precious between them, and no amount of regret could bring back the love they once shared. In the end, Emma learned that sometimes love isn't enough to keep two people together. Trust, respect, and honesty are just as important, and without them, even the strongest relationships can crumble. Months passed, and Emma found herself standing at a new crossroads. Though the pain of the betrayal still lingered, she had grown stronger. She had learned to trust herself again, to focus on what truly mattered, and most importantly, to recognize her own worth. She realized that, despite the brokenness of the past, she had a future waiting for her, one that didn't depend on the remnants of a love that had soured. One evening, as the soft glow of the setting sun filtered through the window of her small apartment, Emma received an unexpected message. It was from Jason. His words were simple, almost desperate. *I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you're willing to talk, I'd like to explain. Asterisk. She stared at the message for a long time. Her mind raced, torn between the person who had loved him and the person she had become since the betrayal. It was so easy to tell herself that she deserved more than this, that she had already made her peace. Yet, there was still a part of her that wondered if closure, not necessarily reconciliation, was what she truly needed. Emma agreed to meet him. It wasn't for him, but for herself. To hear him out, to understand why everything had fallen apart, and perhaps to finally close that painful chapter of her life once and for all. They met at a small cafe they used to visit during the good times of their relationship. Jason looked different. There was no arrogance in his posture, no deflection in his eyes. He seemed smaller, vulnerable, almost as if the weight of his actions had finally crushed the bravado that once shielded him. I don't expect forgiveness, Jason began, his voice quiet but steady. I know I've ruined everything. I was selfish, I lied, and I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to explain. I was so caught up in my own excuses that I lost sight of what was important, the love we had, the life we built. And now I'm sitting here, knowing I'll never get any of that back. Emma listened, the bitterness in her chest softening just a little. His words were laced with regret, but she couldn't ignore the fact that his betrayal had left scars too deep to be erased by mere apologies. Yet, as she looked into his eyes, something shifted. She realized that while she had moved on, the pain of the past could only be healed through acceptance. Not revenge or resentment, but acceptance. I don't want your forgiveness, Jason, she said softly. I want you to understand that what you did wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. And those choices have consequences that go far beyond what either of us expected. Jason nodded, his gaze dropping to the table between them. He knew the truth of her words all too well. But, Emma continued, I've also realized that holding on to the anger, the resentment, it only hurts me more. I'm not asking you to change the past, or to try to win me back. I'm just asking for closure. I need to let go, and I need to forgive, for my own peace. Jason's eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow, but he didn't say anything. He simply nodded, respecting her decision, understanding that his words could never undo the damage. The meeting ended quietly, with no grand gestures or emotional reunions. They parted ways, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt lighter. She had made peace with her past and with herself. There was no closure in the way she had once imagined it, but there was a new understanding, a sense of freedom that had been missing before. Months later, Emma found herself walking down a new path, one filled with hope and possibility. She met someone new, someone who showed her that love didn't have to be complicated or painful. He appreciated her for who she was, and he respected the boundaries she had set. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in a long time, Emma realized that love could be simple. As for Jason, he continued his journey of self-reflection, though the road ahead was long. He had learned the hard way that love could be fragile, and that it required more than just words. It required action, respect, and above all, loyalty. They both moved on in their own ways, but Emma never forgot the lessons learned from the heartache. She learned that love was about trust, honesty, and, most importantly, knowing when to let go. As the months went by, Emma continued to rebuild her life with quiet determination. She had put the past behind her, and though it still occasionally surfaced in moments of solitude, she learned how to embrace those memories as part of her story without letting them define her. Her relationship with Jason, although over, had taught her many valuable lessons. The most important one was that true love couldn't be built on illusions or fleeting moments of happiness. It had to be rooted in trust and shared understanding. It was a hard truth, but it was one that made her stronger, more resilient. Emma began to realize that her happiness wasn't dependent on another person. It came from within, from the choices she made, and from the freedom she had to live authentically. Meanwhile, Jason seemed to struggle with his own demons. He had tried reaching out to Emma a few more times after their meeting, sending messages and leaving voicemails, but each time she had politely but firmly declined. She had given him a chance to explain himself, and that had been enough. It was no longer her responsibility to carry the weight of his guilt. One day, after months of silence, Emma received a letter from Jason. It was unexpected, arriving on a day she had already long since stopped thinking about him. Inside the envelope was a simple, handwritten note. Asterisk, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know that I've been working on myself. I've spent the past few months trying to understand what went wrong and why I hurt you the way I did. I'll never be able to undo the past, but I want to tell you that I'm sorry. I don't expect anything from you, not even forgiveness. I just hope you find happiness, the kind you deserve. Asterisk. The letter sat on Emma's kitchen counter for a long time before she finally opened it. She read the words slowly, her heart no longer tethered to the pain they once caused. She had grown, she realized, and while the hurt had left scars, she was no longer haunted by them. She had built something new for herself, an identity that wasn't tied to Jason, to their past, or to the love that had betrayed her. That evening, as the sun set in soft hues of orange and pink, Emma sat down at her favorite spot by the window, the letter in her hand. She didn't feel angry, nor did she feel compelled to reply. There was nothing left to say. The forgiveness wasn't something she had to offer him anymore. It had already been given, not because he asked for it, but because she had found peace within herself. She took the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer, knowing it would always be there as a reminder of how far she had come. Emma's life was hers again, filled with new adventures, quiet moments of reflection, and the promise of future joys that she had once thought might be lost. A year later, Emma found herself in a place of true contentment. She had started a small art gallery with a friend, where she displayed her own work alongside that of local artists. It was a space of creativity and healing, a place where people could come together and find meaning in art. Emma's art was her outlet, her way of processing the world around her. Each brushstroke on the canvas was a step toward her own healing. And one evening, while hosting an opening for a new exhibit, Emma met someone. His name was Ryan. He was kind, thoughtful, and had an ease about him that made her feel safe. There was no rush in their relationship, no pressure for it to be something it wasn't. They spent time getting to know each other, and Emma found herself enjoying the simplicity of his company. It wasn't the whirlwind romance she had once imagined, but it felt right, gentle, steady, and full of respect. Ryan didn't ask her about her past, and Emma didn't feel the need to explain. What mattered now was who she was in this moment and the love she could offer in the present. She had learned that love, when it came, would be different than before. It would be built on a foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and an openness to vulnerability. In time, as their connection grew, Emma began to open herself up to the possibility of real love again. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about embracing the future with someone who valued her fully. Ryan showed her that love didn't need to be perfect to be beautiful. It just needed to be true. Jason's presence, though lingering in the corners of her mind, no longer controlled her. She had healed. She had moved on. And as she walked forward into this new chapter of her life, Emma realized that she had finally found the peace she had longed for all along.